Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this GGTG Collective catch-up today. As we have done for the last few catch-ups, I'm going to run through one of the daily practices that we encourage our GGTG Collective members to consider adopting. And today we're going to talk about taking time for yourself, which, when I think about it, is kind of an undercurrent to every one of the daily practices. It's sort of that initial permission that you give yourself to set aside time, which you can then use in any number of different ways. And we can talk a little bit about that. But we're really going to drill down into the how and why of taking time for ourselves and what benefits can come from that and how we can actually hack our good girl to really get good at taking time for ourselves. So a little bit of leveraging some of the skills that we have developed through all of these years of taking time for other people in order to turn that back around onto ourselves and really prioritize taking time for ourselves. So just to review all of the daily practices briefly before we get started. Meditation, which we have gone through, is the first one because I do actually believe it is a superpower when you establish a regular daily meditation practice. I'm not going to go into each one, but I just wanted to note on this one for anyone who's just starting here that I did do a GGTG Collective call on meditation. So there is a whole talk on that in the platform. And similarly with coming back into your body, the last time we met, we talked about that one. So there is a whole recording on the hows and whys of doing that. And it is also something which ultimately over time cultivates superpowers. And then taking time for yourself is what we're going to talk about today. And I love that it's that beautiful bright orange because that's just so appropriate in terms of like the color scheme. Daily self-love. And this is sort of what some might call like doing the inner child work or shadow work, and also just loving all parts of ourselves and how we go about doing that, which I will talk about next time. Journaling, it has been something I've touched on as part of some of the other sessions because it's a really powerful way to keep track of where we are, marking our progress, but also highlighting some of our challenges and also wins of things that have gone really well. It's a really great practice. It also allows us, if like say we're getting up in the morning, we want to just dump in the journal. It's a great way to clear your mind. I have used that many, many times. And that one I'll talk about in a couple weeks from now, and then creation and imagination and play, which I won't start getting into because I will never stop. It has been something I've started to prioritize more in my own life, and I'm finding it to be in a really beautiful way, dovetailing with all of the other things that I do, and in a way that I actually never imagined. So I'm excited for that talk. But today we're going to focus on taking time for yourself. Why do we do this? So we have spent so much of our lives thinking about other people that we have, bit by bit, through defining ourselves through what we do for other people, we have forgotten that we need to actually take time for ourselves. We almost have got to know ourselves through the things that we do for other people. So for our family, for our jobs, our successes and achievements have become the way that we think about who we are. But actually, there is something much more fundamental and much more authentic, which has been with us from the very beginning of our lives. And that thing is what we are getting to know. That person is who we are coming home to. So if you have to think of, kind of personifying yourself in a way as a separate person, think about that original aspect, even if it is maybe your inner child, you're thinking of yourself before you started to adopt some of these good girl habits. And really, in adopting our good girl habits, we have to a certain extent pushed our authentic self away because we were choosing things that other people had for us rather than really sticking to what we wanted. And this is not to say that anyone's done anything wrong. This is just the trajectory of the good girl. Because we kept putting others before ourselves, and because we continued that even after we left home through school and work and family and everything else, we can come to feel very distant from who we really are inside. And this is a part of the story of my story that I've told and that I have in the program about how I went to a therapist because I was very depressed. And I was asked to do the values exercise, and I was given all of these cards with values on them. These common things you would think of, integrity, honesty, trust, connection, etc. And I was asked to, categorize them: very important, somewhat important, not important. And I must have sat there with those cards just forever because I couldn't connect to the part of myself that would be able to honestly answer whether those values resonated with me. There was like a wall, a sort of disconnection. And it was almost like I was trying initially to answer and conduct and complete the exercise through the eyes of the people that I had been people pleasing for my whole life. So, well, what would my dad say? What would my mom say? Like, what would this person or that person say? What would this role model say? And rather than being able to answer just from this authentic place of my own sense of self. So taking time for ourselves at the most basic level is an opportunity to come back home to ourselves. And by prioritizing ourselves and setting aside that time for ourselves, we give ourselves the opportunity to come first for once, which may actually be one of the first times in our entire lives that we've given ourselves that chance. That because we are constantly working to please other people, and because we get so much joy and fulfillment and satisfaction out of doing things for other people, we've not really given ourselves the opportunity to prioritize ourselves. So this is an opportunity to establish a new way of being where we are actually putting ourselves first. And before we do anything for anyone else, we're checking in to say, is this right for me right now? And that's probably a question that we don't have the opportunity to ask ourselves very much. And the reason for this, and we will get back to how we can use this as kind of hacking the good girl program. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So this brings taking time for ourselves all the way back full circle. So yes, when you first do it, you feel a bit like you're coming away from all of the things that have made you feel whole and have given you meaning and have given you purpose and have given you identity. You feel like you're coming away from it. And that can be really scary because you're going to get sensations of not being good enough, being selfish, of not having enough time. That's going to be a big protest of the good girl. I don't have time to take time for myself. So then we get there and we actually say, because we need to always include her in all of these conversations, we sit down with her and we say, look, you want to be the best good girl that you can possibly be. And that is what we want too, right? You cannot serve other people if you are exhausted all of the time, or if you are on the verge of a mental breakdown all of the time. I remember especially when my son was younger, I was doing so much for everyone and I had no time, literally no time, not a minute of the day to myself. And I would be giving and giving and thinking, I'm a good mother, I'm a good mother, I'm a good mother, I'm a good mother. And that would give me this comfort that it was all worth it, that the pain I was putting myself through, that the diminishment of my own energy and my own identity was the right thing to do. And then suddenly he would do something that kids do, like knock over a glass onto some important papers. I would absolutely lose it, right? So when we're talking to and that is obviously not the best, like, great mom moment. And I completely forgive myself for that. Those were very difficult times. But you can sit down with a good girl and you can use these examples and say, look, remember that time. And we are giving ourselves grace here. We are not condemning ourselves. We are not, being self-critical, but that happened. It's a fact that happened. And it's a fact that his reaction was understandably one of despair. We can avoid those moments by putting ourselves first. And in fact, We can also teach our children how to show up in the world for themselves first by modeling that behavior. And that's the real good mom day, is when you're able to show them how to be in the world in a way that will create their own sense of wholeness and authenticity, and that they can model in the future to remind themselves when they're having those moments that they need to take time for themselves. So then the good girl is, okay, I mean, I kind of don't believe it, but I can see your point. So let's give it a shot, right? And then you come around to having, which I do feel a lot of the time now, you do have the energy to really give. And I'm giving from a surplus. When I'm giving energy to other people, it's because I have the energy to give. When I'm asked to do something, I check in with myself. And that way, I am so much more effective. I'm so much more powerful in the service to other people. And in fact, often the service that I'm giving is re-energizing me instead of depleting me. So that's why we are going to do this. But how, if you ask? And that is a completely fair question. Start small. We are not trying to move mountains in one day. I'm not asking you to completely reorient your life in service of yourself now. I'm just saying, start small, little things each day that you can do, which are for you. Little bits of time that you can take for yourself that are not going to make you feel anxious immediately. And that may very well mean 5 or 10 minutes, or we'll talk about some other potential practices in a minute, but very small periods of time that you don't find triggering. Again, we don't want to create a healing crisis moment by healing, by enacting our own healing. We don't want to cause like a crisis. Do something that you love. It becomes so self-fulfilling when you do something that you love, because you're actually motivated to do it. And when you're motivated to do something, you will naturally prioritize it. So in that way, it becomes one of these kind of self-fulfilling prophecies, and it will also give you energy. Sorry, I'm just noticing someone left their phone in here and it's making noises. So I'm just going to turn that down. That's what you get for sharing your study with teenagers. It becomes so much easier to motivate yourself to do it, even if you're starting small and you're taking your 10 minutes and it feels really hard, because this is not 10 minutes that you actually have. You're taking it from something else that feels really important. So make it something that you love, that it lights you up, that you're going to come out of those 10 minutes energized, so that the next thing you pick to do off your to-do list, you're going to do it better than you would have done it if you hadn't taken those 10 minutes. Something that really makes you feel very centered and present, very joyful, and sort of relaxed in the moment. And protect your me time. So once you've decided, starting small, figuring out, maybe we can use the bliss list, which we talked about in the last session on coming into your body, picking something that will make you feel really lit up. Make sure it's at a period of time in the day, when you're unlikely to be pulled in another direction. Like, maybe we'll talk about some examples of when that might be, but maybe early in the morning. Or maybe if you get a set lunchtime, pick 10 minutes during your lunch period, or right before you go to bed in the evening. Though if you're meditating before bed, be careful. You probably will fall asleep, but that's okay. That is also okay. Make sure it's a time, and maybe block it out in your diary. It's absolutely sure you will not schedule something over it. And it also, in the very good girl way, allows you to prioritize it. So what are we trying to achieve here by taking time to ourselves? So again, as I said in the beginning, we're coming back to ourselves as compared to this separation and dissociation that we may have been experiencing for much of our lives. So in our constant efforts to please other people, we have very, very often left ourselves out of the equation. So there are parts of ourselves lying scattered on the road behind us from where we started out that we need to go back and pick up, right? Because we want to come back into wholeness. I mean, that is ultimately the goddess is a whole being. She has reclaimed all parts of herself. So we go back down the road and we pick them up bit by bit. And that is another part of sort of doing the shadow work, as they call it, because these aspects of ourselves that we may have rejected in the mission of being the good girl that we have become, they don't go away. You know, they turn into those things that shout at us for attention. They're not going to stop shouting. You cannot completely obliterate a part of yourself. You just ignore it until it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. So pick it up, dust it off, give it a big hug, reincorporate it, reintegrate it into your being, and get to know yourself all over again. I have to say that the time that I've taken to be with myself has now become some of my favorite time in the day, because it is this opportunity. I'm finding new things all the time, and it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. It also allows us to understand our boundaries. So the actual exercise of taking time for yourself becomes a way of feeling into how difficult it can be to prioritize ourselves. So that actually really gets us, allows us to move deeply into an understanding of our people-pleasing habits, and to the extent that these have got quite entrenched into our way of being. You know, if you think about the way the brain works, it's all these neural pathways that govern our behavior. And the behavior starts all the way back with what we believe about ourselves. And if we believe that we are not as important as everyone else around us, then we will be constantly running every thought that we have about every behavior that we want to incorporate into our lives through that belief system. And it's gonna come up red. It's going to come up, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Well, why? I'm asking for 10 minutes in my day to do something that I love. Why should that be a problem, right? And that allows us to trace back the red light that we get through, okay, well, what's the thought? Well, I'm not good enough, or I don't have the time, or I'm not as important as the other people, or I have goals or dreams or plans or things that need to get done first. But why is that more important than taking 10 minutes for myself? Well, it's because I believe that all of these things are more important than me. But do I want that to be the case? Maybe that's a belief that I want to consider letting go of. Because ultimately, if we don't, as I said before, put ourselves first, then we don't actually bring our whole selves to the table for other people either. So this does give us a chance to understand those boundaries and explore where that line is. Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes? Can we extend it to half an hour, right? Can we go even maybe one day we will have a whole hour every day that we devote only to ourselves? What does that feel like? How does that make us feel? So it's a really beautiful way to explore those boundaries and how we are prioritizing ourselves versus others. And I would encourage the incorporation of journaling into this process, so these explorations can be memorialized and really, truly, deeply felt and understood. And then a really basic thing, right? We are recharging our energy, and we're noticing when we're running on empty. And this does also relate to coming back into the body, which is what we talked about last time. So when you're taking time for yourself, one of the things I encourage is to really just come into the body, just really get centered and just feel, where am I? Where is my gas tank? Right? Am I at halfway? Am I almost full, or am I almost empty? Excuse me. And doing this, sorry. Doing this will allow us to become better at monitoring our energy. Sorry. Mm. And notice when we're running on empty, so that we can give ourselves a break before that tank gets all of the way depleted. So then when we notice we're running on empty, we can either extend or create more times in the day when we're taking time for ourselves. So it just becomes a really great way of being able to check in with ourselves. Okay. How can we make time for ourselves? So what I found is that morning is often the easiest. Right when you wake up for some period of time. And there are a couple reasons for this. The first reason is it's often the easiest part of the day to shave a little bit more of by waking up a little bit earlier. Now I can hear you like night owls screaming at me. And maybe for you, it's the end of the day. But for me, it was the morning. And the earlier I got up, the more time I was able to set aside for myself, the more energy I had to do the day. So I found that really, really useful. Don't be afraid to stack, especially initially. A lot of you are going to feel like, I did not have 10 minutes anywhere. Okay, cool. Do you commute to work? Do you have any chores that you do, dishes or, I don't know, laundry? Like, you can stack taking time for yourself on top of other things when you're not actually applying your mind in favor of anyone else. And this is very much for those of us who are so entrenched in doing things for other people and have so many obligations and commitments that we've taken on over the years that we literally cannot find 10 minutes anywhere. So I would imagine it's a fairly small proportion of the community. But for those of you who do identify as being in that category, it is okay to do something for yourself while you're doing something else where you don't have to use your mind for that thing. So use that time to watch a show that you really love, or to listen to a podcast that you really love, or to write in your journal, or to meditate. Though I don't recommend necessarily meditating on your commute because you might just meditate yourself right past your stop. So be very careful about that. But even if you're, going to the gym or you're taking a walk, you can also use that as time to, reflect and to really think, I'm taking this time for myself as an act of that, just the first step of really committing to this. And then pick your favorite activity and prioritize it. So again, you can use the bliss list that we talked about in the coming back into the body session. Pick something from that list, something that's really going to light you up. Prioritize it, prioritize the time that you do it, sit it aside in your diary, schedule it if you have to. Maybe it's something like getting massage. Like, yes, that can also be taking time for yourself. Something that's going to make you feel really, really good. A lot of times, especially with the good girls, we will not cancel something if it's been committed with another person or we've paid for it, right? Because it just kind of challenges the good girl ethos. Great, use that. A bit. It'll make it easier for you to stick to this practice. How to get started. So just being here today is a great first step.